Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 84. And for this episode, which is coming out very near the end of the year, not quite New Year's Eve like the Keto Woman episode that we will be recording. We're going to be doing a Mindset Matters New Year's Eve episode, but we're not far off when this is coming out. So we thought it would be the ideal opportunity just to take a moment to have a pause, a bit of a reflect, a bit of a look forward, and really basically, I guess, just to wish our listeners a very Happy New Year. And we are really just winging this one. We haven't got a plan. So let's go. What shall we chat about?
So Daisy, I think that one of I guess it's a double-edged sword. It can be almost an exciting thing about doing an end-of-year reflection kind of episode. And for me, also becomes a little bit of a dreaded reflection and projection type of episode, is that oftentimes doing the reflecting gives you an opportunity to look back and see what you've been working on, what changes you've been making. And unfortunately, if you're in a little bit of a struggling space, that might almost provide a little too much time to reflect on what hasn't been going well or what you haven't been doing or working on. And then I have always avoided New Year's resolutions and really thinking much about the new year. And at this stage of my life, I'm recognizing that it is important for me to do that. And I think important that I don't do it in a way that sets me up. Like, okay, well, this past year was, in the trash. And so what am I going to do this year? To not set it up in such stark contrast, but instead to just use it as a positive reflecting of where I want to go, where I want to put my energy in this coming year. Not to make any grand resolutions or anything, but to just set myself up with some good overall structure of how I would like to enter into the next trip around the sun, as they say.
Yes, I think that's a big mindset trap. It's that same or very similar mindset trap, I think, anyway. You can tell me what you think. To this time of year, that sort of festive eating window, let's call it, that stretches out over, or can stretch out over, it shouldn't do. This is something we've talked about. It's actually just a handful of days, really. But it quite often just ends up becoming that, well, you throw your hands in the air, screw it. Everything can wait until the new year, because we're coming up to that new year, and there's something about a new year, a fresh start. It's like starting on Monday. And I think this extends, it's so often, especially in the communities that we're in, to do with food, but it just applies to anything and everything. And it's a bit like you say with that whole New Year's resolutions. And I think quite often this last month or two of the year, if there were things, especially if you are the kind of person who makes New Year's resolutions, and you're at that point where if you've been, trying to implement whatever the resolution was that you put in place, and you're at that point where it's like, oh, but it's too late now. Let's give up. Let's throw everything out and just do whatever we want, because we can start again on January 1st. And I certainly fall a little bit into that mindset. And it's, I think it's a potentially dangerous one, as we've discussed in other episodes, that I guess from the point of view of the damage you can do actually in quite a short space of time. But also this whole, like you were saying, just setting it up as this sort of black and white thinking. And inevitably, I mean, I know there are people who thrive on this. They make a new resolution every year and they stick to it. And it's a change, perhaps they've been thinking about making. And okay, so 2022 is going to be the year I learn how to play the violin or whatever it is, or, start learning, whatever it is. And they thrive on that kind of mindset and behavior. And they have a new thing every year and they do it. Great. I'm just not one of those people. So I don't really know exactly where I'm going with this, other than it's a potential minefield that we need to try and avoid, or perhaps learn some strategies or changes in mindset about how to navigate that minefield or just avoid it altogether. Because obviously that's one way to deal with it, isn't it? Right, that's it. I'm not doing New Year's resolutions. I'll make changes as I see fit, as they come up.
I think one of the downsides of how many of us do New Year's resolutions is they are often goal driven. I'm going to lose 40 pounds. I'm going to save this much money. I'm going to buy this home. They're one shot, big thing, big result focused. And what I have really started to resonate more with is when I hear people describe they choose a word or a theme for the new year rather than an outcome. Because again, if by June 3rd you have not reached your outcome, do you give up? Do you keep going for the next 6 months? Versus if your resolution or your goal, I guess, in some way for the year is, for example, I heard someone say the other day, theirs for 2021 was, this is the year of yes.
Oh, I like that.
That they are working on saying yes more often rather than coming up with all of the reasons why they can't do whatever it is, save money, eat differently, socialize more, find a relationship, whatever it is, exercise, whatever, that they were going to work on saying yes, getting more comfortable with saying yes. And I've heard people talk about this is the theme for me this year is balance. And so they just use that as an overarching guide for the year. Is doing this helping me toward my goal of balance versus that pinnacle outcome of 40 pounds or $5,000 or whatever. And I think this is really kind of a brilliant way to look at setting ourselves up for momentum and progress and something to be striving toward all year. It's not just one specific event or outcome that we can measure. It's really a theme, an approach, and a mindset for the year that we see as helping us to be more and more congruent with our true self. So I really love that idea.
I really love that idea. And I like the way you're also setting yourself up for success, because you almost can't help but succeed with that at least once. Mm-hmm. And you've only got to do it once, mm-hmm. and you've succeeded at it, haven't you? Mm-hmm. Because I do think there is something with, it's a little bit like just the sort of pause and reflect that you often have at the end of the day, just quickly reflecting, have you got the things done you wanted to do today? What is your to-do list for tomorrow? Maybe you have that at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, both, whatever it is. But I think most of us have that to a certain extent. There's a kind of a mental to-do, things that you're wanting to do or planning to do, whatever it is that day. And so I think there's that natural tendency to have a bit of a reflection back on the year and looking towards the next year. So I really love that approach, because it's a great way to look back and reflect on the year in a curious way, in an open way, to be looking for something. Well, what's something, sort of framing that reflection in looking for something to focus on the next year. You mentioned saying yes more often. The thing that came to my mind for a lot of people could be saying no more often. Mm-hmm. the possibilities there are endless, and it's something that you go on to build on with the next year. So at the end of next year, you'll be reflecting back on that New Year's thought, word, whatever it is that you came up with, and you will have no doubt progressed somewhat into that, and that will give you something to reflect on and think, well, what's going to be the focus for 2023? But all of those are building their character and identity building, aren't they? They're working on yourself and your well-being and your happiness, whatever it is. I like that a lot. I mean, really, this has been a year of massive upheaval for me, and I only really feel like I'm sort of coming out of the whirlwind a bit, really, and just sort of starting to settle into a very different life. So yes, I'll have to ponder on what that thought or word or thing to focus on is. But I love that idea a lot. Yes. What about you?
I think for me, the challenge of old-fashioned New Year's resolutions and even this new age way of thinking about next year, I still come into that place of decision making about what would it be. And maybe there's not just one. Maybe it's a handful of things I want to be working on or whatnot. But as you were talking, I was just starting to sift through my brain, like, what would mine be? What's the thing? And I know for me, different things than what you've gone through this year, and your move and new home and construction on your new home and changing some things with work and career and different things like that. For me, a couple of changes that have come about this past year that are making me have to pay attention to things more is some continued change in my work life and the type of things I'm doing in my career. And those bring me to some vulnerabilities, some limiting beliefs that I struggle through. So having to face those more, I think, is something that 2022 will entail for me. And also toward the last part of this year, starting a new romantic relationship and all of the host of opportunities for growth that brings me. Although I talk about this often, it is still something that I personally struggle with, and that is feeling the feelings attached to events, conversations, whatever, rather than just expecting myself to change the behavior around it. So there have been many times in this past year where I've reflected on, oh, I could have done this differently. And in therapy, have been talking more about maybe it's not just changing the behavior, but maybe it's more about allowing myself to feel what I feel. Because that helps me to understand why the behavior is the behavior and maybe not pathologize myself so much for the behavior that I have chosen. So just another kind of internal evolution of things. And I think for me, again, allowing myself to acknowledge either to myself or to others the feelings connected to things rather than judging myself for the behaviors that result.
Very interesting. And yes, I was wondering if you would bring that up. I didn't want to. I wanted to see if you would bring it up. But yes, obviously we talk at length behind the scenes, as it were. We're very good friends. Online, mostly. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get together in person for a while. But yes, that's the biggest thing, reflecting back on your year, where you were at the beginning of the year and where you are now at the end. And that's been very lovely for me to see you finding somebody, because I know at points you felt like it was never going to happen, and you were getting ready to throw in the towel. So it does show that perseverance pays off, that the right person is out there lurking somewhere. So that's been something nice for me to see. Even though I get less of your time now. She's so busy now.
That is true. But again, it brings up
a good thing.
It brings up, challenges. It brings up ways of seeing myself, interpreting myself, ways of behaving that I'm comfortable with, ways of behaving that I'm not comfortable with, and having to continue sorting that out. And it's been wonderful, but it's also been challenging. And so I really want to continue that growth into 2022 and just to incorporate that as part of my internal journey.
Yes, I can imagine the endless challenges of trying to, just work out how to mix yourself into somebody else's life. That's a whole nother, we should do a podcast episode.
There we go.
Well, so there we have. We didn't know exactly where this conversation was going, and that's the way it went. I certainly enjoyed it and enjoyed chatting to you, as I always do, and it was good fun not knowing what we were going to talk about. So I would like to thank you for another wonderful year of recording Monday Mindset with you, and wish you the very happiest of 2022s, and all the people at home listening too. Thank you very, very much for listening to us ramble on at length sometimes. We wish you a very, very happy new year too.
Absolutely. And in some ways, a thank you to everyone who listens, because this provides us such a neat platform for us to dig into things we're interested in, to share things. As we talked about, this is how this podcast even came about, but I think there's even more reason to do it now. We're both seeking things to share with each other and to continue processing. So if it were not for this platform, we might not be quite as motivated to be doing that. So I appreciate this and appreciate people who listen and give feedback. And just a reminder that we're open to ideas. If you have things you'd like to hear us talk about, please let us know. And again, a happy 2022 to everyone.
I hope you have a very wonderful week and a very wonderful new year.
You too, Daisy. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.